Hello, everyone. My name is Ina Liu, and I'm the Chief Enterprise Officer of AGI House. I lead the initiative to be a bridge of enterprise innovation and Silicon Valley AI. So today, I am super excited to have 4 of the top industry executive leaders here sharing with us about AI and its deployment in the industry. I think in the past, we have seen many people coming to me in our hackathons to say, well, we love building on the frontier of the AI, and we want to work on real-world problems. I think in this event, it's very cool that we can actually discuss this with true experts in 2 of the very regulated industries, finance and pharma. Let me do a quick intro. We have Gregg Spivey, head of AI and ML from Eli Lilly. And we have Branson, who is the global head of AI and ML from GSK. And here we have Patrick Loerch, the SVP head of clinical data science from Gilead Sciences. And we have Ankur Prasad, SVP of Capital One. Okay, I would love you guys to tell us a little bit more about yourself and how your organization is at the intersection of AI. And maybe share with us one example of AI systems that has been deployed inside your organization and had made a real impact. And tell us what made it happen. We'll start from here. Gregg?
Hi, everyone. Great to be here. As Nina said, my name is Gregg Spivey from Eli Lilly pharmaceutical company. I'm based in our South San Francisco office, where we're building up an office to focus on AI in drug discovery in particular. I'm working on 2 things. One, understanding the ecosystem of companies working on AI drug discovery, particularly all the exciting startups in that space, and thinking about how we can bring them in and partner with Eli Lilly and work on models together. The other thing I'm focusing on is a new project we call Lilly Tune Lab, which is a project to make AI models broadly available to the biotech ecosystem. So something we're really excited about, democratizing access to the best AI models. So a great example of impact there. We took the best AI models Lilly has internally to work on common problems everyone has in drug discovery, things like small molecule ADMET, which is like basically, is a molecule a good drug or not? These are models that typically only the biggest pharmaceutical companies have internally. Small biotechs don't have them. And we've made those models available free of charge to the biotechs to use. And in return for that access, we asked the biotechs to contribute wet lab training data back to make the models better for everyone, using a process called federated learning, which means they don't have to share the data directly with Lilly or with the other biotechs. No one ever sees the data, but we can pool it together in that way to let the model train from everyone's data. So we're really excited about building that ecosystem. We're seeing a lot of really good results of biotechs who are going from using 0 AI models, just doing drug discovery using just pure human intellect, to using models and seeing really good results. And we're starting to see the first information that the models are getting better as we collect this data. Federated learning is really cool technology. Actually, Google did a lot of the founding work on it back in 2016, and it's great to be scaling the application of that research to something as cool as making new drugs for everyone.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Branson. I'm a physician scientist. I never bothered practicing medicine because that would be foolish for all concerned, and I did my PhD in quantum information theory and ML back in like 2003. Back when we used to joke that neural networks were the second best way of solving any problem. I lead a research group and other things at GSK, but my research group is probably my favorite children. And I guess the 2 things I'm interested in right now is probably our AI scientist program. So we launched that to everyone in GSK last July. And it's been sort of fascinating seeing how that is working and evolving, and we're at the point now where we've got a large number of data sets in the system, some of them outside, some of them internal, but really actually capturing the taste of the organizations and watching people trying to create heuristics and various types of things and seeing how we can learn across that and learning from their reasoning traces. That's been really impactful. And I guess the second thing is probably following on from news this week. So we announced the results of bepirovirsen, which is a chronic hepatitis B drug. That's a drug where we can get a functional cure in sort of 20% of the people, right? The challenge at the time, 5 or maybe 6 years ago it was, is we knew it worked, but like if you just treated everybody, it basically wouldn't work, right? And at that time, this is kind of almost actually was pre-COVID, you couldn't make enough mRNA on the planet, right? You'd need tons of the stuff to treat everybody. So we had to work out a way of identifying the people. So I kind of convinced people at GSK to do the world's most expensive clinical trial where we measured all the things in our people. So proteomics, viral sequence, host sequencing, and a whole bunch of different factors. And we applied machine learning to a very, very simple vanilla ML, like almost basically an autoencoder type device. And we were able to work out what are the characteristics of the people that are likely to respond and the kinetics to respond or partially respond, but also the characteristics of the virus and the host to help us design the next generation of medicines. And that ML tool went on to select the people that went into the trial and help us design the trial, and has led to the registration today. So I live in a world that has very, very long time scales, but big impact, right? So, unfortunately, all our learning cycles are, sparse, time dependent, and infrequent when it gets close to the event. So it's a challenging place to do machine learning in, but very impactful. Happy to be here.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, my name is Patrick Loerch. I started off my career as a biochemist on the bench. I was really, really bad at it, so I quickly moved into coding around the time the human genome was sequenced. And then I could understand the science and I could write code, but I couldn't design an analysis, so I went off and got a PhD in biostatistics. I've been at a couple different pharma companies. Currently, I lead a group called Clinical Data Sciences at Gilead Sciences. So maybe a little different. We are core to the business. So the group is about 1,100 people. It's all of the biostatisticians, the statistical programmers, real-world evidence, clinical pharmacology. So we design every study from preclinical coming into clinical all the way through to phase 3 and post-authorization observational research. I will say AI will have an impact on us and will change the way we do everything every step of the way. One area, to answer the question, an example where we've seen a lot of benefit from AI already is clinical trial operations. So you can imagine you're running a study, you need to recruit 1,000 patients. How do you pick where to recruit from? So site selection, the actually inclusion exclusion criteria around the patients, I think on almost a weekly basis, updating where those sites are. Are you getting the right patients? You've got to compete for patients with every other pharma company on the planet. And then you can imagine you've got an entire portfolio of compounds. So you're not just optimizing for that trial, but you might be optimizing for 50 trials. So that space is a really interesting one that has lended itself to AI. I think I loved what was said previously. The value proposition there is getting drugs to market faster. Beneficial to patients, higher NPV, longer patentable life. So it's one of these nice use cases that lends itself to a complex problem and has a very clear sort of business impact at the end of the day.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Ankur. I'm the Chief Product Officer for Capital One's Bank, so I guess the sole finance representative here. Just a quick intro about myself. Been here for like 3 years. Spent many years prior to that in Amazon and Meta, so after those I figured I'd do something completely different, make things more difficult for myself, so joined the regulated industry there. I did learn in talking to all of you that pharma is way ahead of banking, so some good learning to be had there. To answer the question, the way we think about AI is probably in 3 broad categories. One is how we AI, so how are we using the latest tools, making coding more efficient, things like that. The second is how does AI make the current business that we have a lot more effective and efficient? And I'm going to take an example right here. And the third one, which is very nascent, is how will all of these AI trends just transform what it means to be a bank, right? So an example of that is with agentic commerce, people may start putting money with their agents. What's the role of the bank there? How should we think of banking in the future? If I look at the second category that I talked about, which is How can we use AI to make our current business a lot more effective? Firstly, we spend a lot of time thinking through just the basic foundational pieces that we'll need. How can we modernize a core? How can we take all of the data that we've gathered over 20 plus years and make them model ready? So luckily, we had been doing a lot of that work already. And then we were able to take that information, take all of our AI model investments, so start off with key use cases. So the two that I'm really excited about right now are, one is just being able to easily classify the intent. So anytime someone reaches out to you and has a problem, being able to accurately figure out what the problem is. And we've taken a very human-centric approach here, which is if someone's a victim of fraud, for example, you don't want them going through a phone tree, you don't want them going bounced back and forth, they're stressed out. How can you figure that immediately and then direct them actually to a human? So there can be human-to-human empathy there. And broadly in customer service, how can we make our agents a lot more effective in terms of even basic things like transcription or next best actions that they can do to serve our customers better. Broadly speaking, my big learning has been we have to take, in a serious industry, a very step-by-step approach versus moving super fast. So you're trying to solve the most basic problems first, build our learning from there, minimize the risk, and then get into some of the more exciting things.
Thank you so much for that great intros. And now I want to add on to that end note. I want to give a hard question, which is for all the heavy regulated industries you guys are in, any decisions if you're adopting agentic systems could have real consequences if things go wrong. For example, you're dealing with patients, you're dealing with financial frauds, and so on. So what do you guys think when you are adopting agentic systems in the future, the line should be drawn between automated decisions versus human decisions? Could you give us some more context and also share your latest thinking or experimentation on that? Thank you.
Maybe
Yeah,
I'll
Kim.
start. So in our world, there's, I guess, two lines. The first line is early research, where you can do a lot of these things and deploy it because it doesn't change a patient. You're not changing management. You're not changing a drug and things like that. And then as you get closer to the clinic, it matters, right? So even if you're using an algorithm, a model you've developed that you think, okay, these people are more likely to respond, and I want to use them to enroll in a trial, that's actually making a decision. That's making a decision whether they get access to randomize to some treatment or not, whether they would benefit or not. And even at that point, we have to seek and convince a set of regulators and work with them very, very concretely. So when we think about risk, and we have an entire group of responsible AI and GSK, we have a VP of AI ethics and policy who works this sort of thing. We think about all these sort of things. We think about what's the utility of the benefit, right? Versus a human doing it. What's the magnitude of the decision, right? And what's the consequence if it goes wrong, and how quick is it to unwind, right? And so some things, very simple things, maybe it doesn't matter so much. There's other types of things where there's large opportunity costs and things like that, where you're literally, for example, might be I'm doing surgery versus not on a patient, right? And we have a drug, for example, where we know if you have a particular genetic marker and these sorts of things, you're really likely to respond to the drug. And the surgery has a whole set of side effects. So in that circumstance, we can say, okay, and if we did the drug, give you the drug, and you're not responding, we did imaging, we can always give you the surgery. So in that case, we can do it. But if you do the surgery, you then have absolute risk, and at that point we can't give you the drug. So there are cases like that, and so we think very carefully about how that works. And this is where we sort of have to engage regulators. And a lot of our regulators are really used to, honestly, deterministic systems, right? So they're used to code and medical devices and things like that. And when you have, examples like avionics, I can prove that system A is safe and works with these domains, and system B is safe and works with these domains, and I can fuse them together, show both things is safe, right? They like that kind of thing. But in our world where we have, these systems are probabilistic systems, and I have to look at the input domain, the decision it makes, we have to be very careful about the bounds of which it's operating in. So you see a lot of stuff gating on the input distributions that come to things to make sure they behave in the way. And it's still very early days to do that, because they're really concerned about what happens in that one rare event where you've sampled something very odd and something strange has happened where all these systems interact. And so we're still very early on the research phase. We're going to prove and show these things are safe. And so that's kind of the conversation we're in. So that's why for a lot of our things right now, there's still at some point a human in the loop. There's probably speeding up a process that might be quantifying, how much of a certain receptor is expressed in a tissue sample or these sorts of things. And usually we've had some ground truth we can compare to, so we can show it's like 99% the same. But these are always a sort of speeding up a decision. But there's usually at some point, because of where we are right with our regulator, a human in the loop, which may be a physician or maybe someone else. But that's kind of where we are right now broadly. There are only a few cases where maybe it's medication renewal or things like where the risk is low, the patient's been on it, that you can automate decisions, right? That's probably the first case that happened in Utah earlier this year.
Yeah, just to add on, I really like Kim's framing around the different elements of the drug discovery life cycle. We focus a lot on the earlier stages where you're doing lab work, and that's an area where you really can push the iteration cycles, because whether a human designs a molecule or an AI model designs a molecule, you're then synthesizing that molecule, and then you're running tests on it in a lab to see whether it works or not. And that's an area where you can really push the iteration cycles, and you can get a lot of quick feedback and use that feedback both to evaluate the performance of AI models, but then obviously to create a data flywheel where the models continue to get better as you do that. So that is more of, I guess, traditional machine learning, where you're trying to push how much data can we get, how can we get the data quicker, more cheaply, more high quality, and build better models. And I think for those reasons, we've seen a lot of success in the pharma world in spaces like that. If you think about de novo antibody design, obviously started by AlphaFold and now continuing in isomorphic, and then other startups working in that space, companies like Chai Discovery and Boltz Bio, they can have these really exciting rapid iteration loops, and we can benchmark their performance similar to how we saw Anthropic, Gemini, OpenAI compete on benchmarks and league tables and so on, and that drove a lot of innovation. We're starting to see that in some of these spaces like de novo antibody design, and that's really exciting because it's a tangible part we can make really rapid progress on and see that competition and see that learning.
Thank you.
Okay, I guess I'm the last pharma person. A slightly different angle on the question, maybe. I guess, and a few of us had discussed this before. I guess I'm less interested in like autonomous AI. I'm more interested in collaborative AI. So if you take one space like dose, so we do a lot of experiments in animals and preclinically, and then we have to translate that into humans. And we have to, for the phase 1 study, we've got to predict what's the most appropriate dose within a therapeutic area window. It can't be too high and there's safety. It can't be too low. And to do something like that, you bring together a pathologist, someone from DMPK, from clinical pharmacology, the researcher, the clinician. So it's really a team. Like we always say, drug discovery and development is a team sport. So I guess where I get really interested in AI is, can AI actually be a multiplier for the team? Or how can the AI actually become more of a team member and help us to sort of see insights when we bring together all these different scientific disciplines to make sort of that decision? So I agree with everything that's said. I think if you rely on AI as sort of an autonomous decision maker, it becomes very difficult within a GXP environment. It's probabilistic, it's not deterministic. I think where we see the real value is having AI almost at the center, helping to identify sort of insights across multimodal evidence to sort of make the best decision. So it's sort of answering the question without answering the question. I think I'll avoid question number 1 as well. No, I think it's an interesting time because I would say pharma in general and biotech has sort of been a consumer of the products from tech companies, and with the bar for coding lowering, we're actually seeing a lot of experimentation internally to an extent that you haven't really traditionally seen within a pharmaceutical company when it comes around coding and AI. What I would love to see is maybe building on that is just more of a collaborative relationship. I'll be the first to openly admit I've been at 4 pharmaceutical companies. We're a black box. None of you probably know how we work or how we make decisions. I think one of the places we need to move is just really sort of opening up how our decisions are made. What is it we need? What are really the problems? Because we have a lot of people coming to us and, myself with really good ideas, but it's clear it just doesn't sort of fundamentally fit into like what we need to make a decision about a molecule or a medicine and sort of move it forward. So what I do hope to see is with some of the barriers coming down, just much more collaboration between what is sort of a traditional silo between life sciences, consuming products, and sort of the tech industry making them, and a little more sort of collaborative building together.
Yeah, great.
All right, I guess I'll have to take the FDA question, which is always challenging for a C-level exec at a major pharma. Look, it's not adversarial, right? Like, I think that's the first thing to understand is the regulator wants to help you do new things. No one joins the FDA to say no to stuff or to keep the world the state of the art of the 1950s or something, right? The game is how do we do something and how do they provide a reasonable challenge, right? A scientific challenge to do something that is the right thing. So I might want to push something and I want a massive experimental endpoint. And we have this conversation about the dialogue about what's the evidence. Let's get some third-party people in. How does this fit together? Every study is a negotiation. And it's interesting because it's a negotiation. We have a few different things. We want to do new things. We want everyone to get some medicine faster. We want to show the medicine safe, reliable, efficacious. But we also need to be consistent such that the clinical community can compare with other previous studies that have been done, right, as well. So there's a interesting fact of how you're consistent with the past in a way. How do you push to add new things to the future in the right way that's sort of still safe and reliable for patients? And some of this sort of stuff is you have a back and forth about doing things, and it's often a negotiation. It takes time. So as an industry, we do get together. We have various bodies that work with, as expert panels that work with the FDA, and they're members from academia, they're members from industry together that sort of sit down and do this sort of stuff. And it's sort of a back and forth. And then I guess the other thing is that regulatory interactions also happen at a global scale, right? So the FDA is obviously one big draw card for doing things, but different regulatory regimes in different countries will do different levels of risk and things like that for the benefit or to do things or how they see things for their patient populations as well, right? So there's also just trade-offs there where they also exchange things across things. So you may be able to do a different study, for example, in China or maybe in North America, maybe North America or maybe South America than you can in Japan, for example, right? And there's trade-offs and reasons before that, and then maybe after they've concluded some more evidence, you'll start to be able to run those sorts of studies there. But it is a dialogue. It's not adversarial. And like, if you wanted to work in a regulated industry, my advice to anyone, and really most of my career has been building startups, I'm not a big pharma guy, is actually engage them early on. They're actually really interested to talk to you. And say, hey, I'm trying to build this thing. How's the best way to do it? Like, don't say, I'm going to do this thing, hide from the regulator until possible. Like, that never works out, right? Like, that's just storing up trouble. Working out at least what the game is and what they would look for and starting a dialogue and trying to meet some people there is really important.
Great.
Yeah, I just think it's really exciting that the tech world, to abbreviate it that, whether it's small startups or all the way up to, Google and then OpenAI, Anthropic, are all taking a lot more of an interest in science in general, but also obviously particularly life science and pharma. I think you hear the founders of those companies talk about wanting to advance science, wanting to bring new drugs to patients faster as part of like the reason they created their AI companies in the first place. So sadly, there are still a lot of problems left in pharma. Drugs are expensive to make. There are a lot of failures, and there's a lot of room for improvement. And we see a lot of people, whether they're startups we interact with, or engineers, or other people we're trying to hire, being attracted to work in our industry because the impact story is so obvious. You get to help move the needle and bring better drugs to patients faster. So I would encourage everyone who is interested in that to think about building in this space in some way.
Yes, definitely build for AI for science and advance our science progress. We might have time for one question. Is there any takers? Okay. Maybe we'll go quick, but we will try to squeeze that one in.
I'm a postdoc at Stanford University.
Yep, I got it. So look, brain organoids, mostly useless, sorry. Unless you're studying things like epilepsy and things like that with electrode arrays, they're not useful for toxicity, things like that. Blood-brain barrier, other models are really probably on point. Organoid technology is probably best in oncology for the tumor type, things like that. We probably prefer mixed cell culture models for understanding toxicity with neurons and associated glial cells and astrocytes, those sorts of things. The Modernization Act, I think, is still in very early days in how that works together and how we're thinking about these models. Nobody here is signing up to have there's no one that's replacing 12 months tox studies in animals or primates and things like that, right? It would be irresponsible to do so. And even we've had some, I could tell you guys stories at the break. There's been examples of things that looked all good through primate studies and gone to man and had horrible effects, right? And you can think of some of the early T-cell engagers. There was a terrible trial in France about that. So what it is demonstrating that, yes, we're going to start to learn and use these models. We're going to use machine learning models to kind of link the signals we get from these cheaper models that we can do at scale. It's a good thing. It reduces the use of animals. It should speed things up. It should weed things out early on. But your brain organoids in specific, sorry, they're not there yet. And I'm sure we could talk about it in detail, but it's a very unvarnished answer, but you get that with an Australian.
Thank you guys so much for this wonderful panel. Thank you guys again.